Hey, Motorman here with my tip of the week. If you've never been to this channel before and just wandered here by purely accidental, I'm a motor officer instructor, been that for over 21 years. I've taught thousands of average riders the police motor officer techniques, and I'm the maker of the Ride Like a Pro video. Today we're going to talk about leaning the motorcycle and why so many people have a fear of leaning the motorcycle and why it's so important to get over that fear. Now take a look at this Road King here, the way it's sitting right now. It's leaning on the kickstand. I'm going to guess that's about maybe an 18 or 20 degree lean. That's not much at all. Most people are afraid to lean their motorcycle any more than what you see this bike leaning right now. And that becomes a problem. Even in a simple U-turn, you got to lean further than this. On a winding road, you better be able to lean much further than this. The bike is capable of 32 degree lean angle. In addition, while we're riding, I've got a new gadget I wanted to try. This is from bakerbuilt.com. They make various products to keep the wind off the rider. You see it a lot on Go Wings and Sport Tours. And because the Road King has a windshield, a lot of people ask me about this, how it is versus the Electra Glide. The windshield doesn't block near as much wind as the Electra Glide Batwing fairing, or probably even the Road Glide fairing. So I heard about this, and I can tell you this, it takes one bolt to put on. It's pretty easy. Forget the instructions there. Almost, you can't even see in the pictures what you're supposed to be doing, but I'm going to show it to you. It's pretty easy. And what this does is supposed to deflect the wind down so it doesn't come up to the rider. Here it is right here. And there's one bolt that goes up in here, and that's all there is to installation. So while I'm riding today, I'm going to show you, or at least try to figure out if that's helping at all. It's about 59 bucks, and I didn't buy this. They sent it to me for a test, and I'm going to tell you if I think it's worth the 59 bucks. I know they make a lot of different wings and different products to block the wind, and I've heard from other people they work very well, but that's usually, like I said, on Go Wings and Sport Tours and even sport bikes. But I'll be testing this as we go. So if you're ready, come on, we'll go for a ride. You can hop on the back, just keep your hands to yourself. Okay, so we're going to talk about leaning the motorcycle and why you might be afraid of leaning your motorcycle. Now I know probably many of you won't admit it, but you are afraid to lean that motorcycle. I see it all the time. I've put a couple of thousand students through my class, and that is the number one thing they are afraid of, is getting that bike leaned over. Now at higher speeds, above about 20 miles an hour, people don't have as much a fear of leaning the motorcycle, but they still do fear it. I've seen people run right off the road around a mild curve because they think they're leaning the bike too far, and they're really not. And they straighten up. When you straighten up as you're coming around a curve, your turn is going to be very wide and you're going to run off the curve. It's the most common motorcycle crash, called failure to negotiate a curve. And some years ago, I believe it was the early 80s, a fellow named Dr. Hurt did a study on motorcycle crashes, and I believe they did about 400 cases of motorcyclists that failed to negotiate a curve. And what they found out in every single case, by evidence at the scene, tire marks, etc., scrapes, the type of motorcycle, that the motorcycle was capable of rounding the curve at the speed the rider was going. The rider was the one who wasn't capable. And sometimes alcohol had something to do with that, because let's face it, it throws off your perception and your judgment. But you don't have to be intoxicated or high to be afraid of that lean. And I made a whole video about how to get over that fear using a bicycle. And here we're going to come around this curve. I'm going to downshift. I'm going to do my braking. I'm going to push forward on the left grip. The more I push forward on that left grip, the more the bike will lean, the tighter the turn is going to be. That's just a simple example. And something that is, for the most part, instinctual. It's when you have to do it for quickly or in an emergency situation that people don't realize that, and they tend to steer it like you would a car, and of course that causes them to run off the curve. Here we go again. Push forward on that left grip. The bike leans left and goes left. Now I just heard a little bit of my kickstand touching the ground, so that means I was somewhere around 32 degrees, 30 degrees lean. To find your bike's lean limits, I stress you should do that under controlled conditions in a parking lot, and you do it to get over that fear a little bit at a time. Start turning big circles, 50 or 60 feet around, and when you're making a circle, if you're making it to the left, you want to look over your left shoulder the entire time you're making that circle, because there ain't no straight part to a circle. I've said this a million times, so the head should never go straight. If you're circling to the right, you should be looking over your right shoulder the entire time. It's a nice view out here, isn't it? This is the Gulf of Mexico. Nice little beach. It's a fake beach. They put the sand here because otherwise it'd just be rocks. That water's kind of cold. It's down in the 50s, I understand. At least my swimming pool is down at 58 degrees. Oh yeah, you got to get over that fear leaning the motorcycle. The best way, like I said, get out there in a big open area, start turning circles to the left and then circles to the right. Little by little, try to tighten up those circles. You should be able to get to where, well, eventually you get to where you could start scraping the pegs of the boards. When you hear that scraping sound, it says you pretty much reached the limit of the lean angle, not to go any further. It's important to find those lean limits under controlled conditions. Another good way of finding those lean limits and getting into leaning that motorcycle is try making giant figure eights. Say 42, 48 foot circles. You can easily mark those off in any parking lot where they have painted lines. They're usually 9 feet apart. And in a 40-foot figure eight, you'll be quickly turning from the left and transitioning to the right. Those transitions are important. So many people get in trouble out on the street. They got to make a swerve. Maybe they could swerve one way, but they've never tried doing it quickly from one direction to the other, and they wind up smacking right into the thing that they're looking at, which is usually the car that violated their right of way. So practice big figure eights. As you get better, narrow those figure eights down. That forces you to use your head and eyes, and head and eyes is so important. When coming around a curve, you want to look as far around the curve as possible. Lean that motorcycle. It turns by leaning. In order for the motorcycle to turn without leaning, you have to be under about 5 miles per hour. And if you're to get under 5 miles per hour and lean the motorcycle, you have to be really, really good with the clutch, throttle, and rear brake. If you watch the slow race at any of these bike meets, granted they're going straight, but that's what they're using is the clutch, throttle, and rear brake. And most of those people that are good at the slow race have never actually tried turning their motorcycles at 5 miles per hour or less. But if they did, it'd make them even better with the clutch and throttle. But at low speeds, say about 10 miles per hour, the bike must lean. If you're going to make a U-turn, speed on an average road, 24-foot wide road, and that is your average road, should be about 8 to 10 miles an hour. As long as you're above 5, the motorcycle will not fall over. Even if you're not that good with the clutch and throttle, if you keep your speed above 5 miles per hour, there'll be more force pulling you forward than gravity pulling you down. And now I'm gonna tell you one of my favorite cop stories, because people seem to like these stories. I call this one conning the con, because I love to do that. It was one of my specialties, getting confessions out of people without ever raising my voice without ever putting a hand on them, and of course without waterboarding them. Though I have been tempted at times to do just that, but I never did. But this is a story about a burglary. I get a call to this house. Guy says somebody came in my back sliding glass door. He said, I don't know if it was locked or not, but either way, it's off the track, and the only thing I find missing is my camcorder. And he shows me where the camcorder was in a bedroom, sitting on top of a dresser, and the box is there, but the camcorder's gone. So as usual, I say, do you have any suspects? Do you know anybody who might want to get into your house when you're not home? He says, well, I don't know anybody specifically. I hate to name somebody. He says, but my neighbor's kind of a shady guy. I said, well, what makes you think so? He says, well, we're kind of friends, you know, but I notice we sit outside, and if a cop car pulls down the street, all of a sudden he finds an excuse to run inside. So I get the guy's name, and I says, if I go over there and I knock on his door, will he come to the door? He says, I don't think so. So, all right, well, whenever you have a burglary, you want to do what we call a neighborhood check. You want to check a few houses in either direction. And in this case, since it was a back door, he came in, the house is facing it in the back. And I do that, and I check a few of them. And then I go to the neighbor's house, who he's kind of set as a suspect. And I knock on the door. Of course, it looks like somebody's there. There's a car in the driveway, but he doesn't answer the door. So now I got to figure out a way to get this guy to come to the door. Well, now that I have his name and his approximate age, I run a check and I find out he's got a warrant for, guess what? Burglary. So there's a warrant out for his arrest. That's why every time he sees a cop, he beats feet inside. So I come up with a story that I thought might help me. I got an old wanted poster of a guy, scruffy looking guy with a beard, and I don't even remember what the charge was for, the wanted poster. But I figure I'm going to go to the door, and I knock on the door, and I keep pounding on it until somebody comes to the door. And it's, matter of fact, his wife comes to the door, and I came up with this story. I said, ma'am, you know, see this poster of this guy? I said, you ever see him? Anybody, you know anybody who looks like this? She says, no, I've never seen him. I said, well, the reason I'm here is because there was a burglary in a couple of houses on this street, and one of the neighbors said that he saw a guy that kind of fit this description lurking around, and then he saw your husband go up to the guy and chase him out of the neighborhood. He's like, you know, he's like the hero of the neighborhood. So I just like to speak with your husband. If he could tell me, yeah, this is the guy he chased out of the neighborhood, I've got my burglary suspect. So he's behind the door and he's listening to this. Now he thinks he can come out. He doesn't know I know who he is. He can come out and tell me, yeah, that's the guy. I chased him out of the neighborhood. I just made the story up, but it's a good story. And he, of course, wants to look like a hero, at least to me. So he comes from around the back of the door. And I said, oh, how you doing? Look, can you take a look at this wanted poster for me? I said, the neighbor told me they saw you chasing this guy out of the neighborhood, actually almost running down the street. You scared him so much. He goes, yeah, that's right. It was a few days ago. I remember that. He looked kind of suspicious, and he was walking around through the backyards. And I said, this guy's up to no good. So I approached him. I said, you better get the hell out of here. And he did. He started running. I said, okay. I said, by the way, you're under arrest. Well, this shocked him, but he didn't put up a fight or anything, and he doesn't know what for. I said, I got a warrant for your arrest. He knows he's got a warrant. So he comes by peaceably. I take him to the jail, and I have him in the interview room. And what I really want to talk to him about, of course, is this burglary. With the warrant, I don't have to do anything, just verify who he is, and he had ID, and then put him in jail. But I said, I think I'm going to try to get a confession out of this guy. So I read him his rights. He thinks I'm reading him his rights because I arrested him on the warrant. I'm actually reading him his rights because I'm about to question him in this burglary. But once he says he's willing to talk to me, oh, now I got him. So I read him his rights. I said, are you willing to talk to me? He says, yeah. And I explained to him that his neighbor right next door had a camcorder stolen out of his house. He said, well, he's a friend of mine. I would never steal anything from him. I said, I'm sure you didn't. I said, but here's the thing. Whoever stole the camcorder, when they picked it up, they dropped the battery out of the camcorder, and we got a fingerprint on that battery. I says, if I check your fingerprints right now, I'm not going to find that a match on that camcorder battery, am I? He says, no way. So I said, okay, we're in like an interview room. So I walk actually inside the jail, and I tell the correctional officer, and they give me a print card, and I tell him what's going on. I said, once I get this guy's print, I'm going to bring the card to you, and I want you to wait about 5 minutes, and then come out and say, yep, it's a perfect match. So he says, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I go back out to the guy, and I'm just sitting there staring at him, and he's looking at me, and he's shaking his head. I'm going to find my prints. I would never steal from you. He's my neighbor. You don't do that to neighbors. A couple of minutes go by, I'm not saying a single word. Out comes the CO, and he's got a bunch of printouts from the computer. I guess he wanted to get a little Hollywood. So he rolls it out. It's like 40 pages long on the floor. He goes, it's an exact match. It's this guy. So I look at him, and he goes, yeah, prints don't lie, I did it. So now I got him for the burglary. But to go a bit further, I said, what did you do with it? You still got it? Because maybe if I give the camera back to this guy, he'll waive prosecution on it. He goes, no, I pawned it. I said, you pawned it? Now I'm thinking to myself, I also have been dealing in stolen property, another felony. I said, you don't happen to have the pawn ticket, do you? He says, no, but it's at home. My wife's got it. Can I call her? I'll tell her to give it to you. I said, okay. I leave him there. He's arrested on both the warrant and the burglary. I get the pawn ticket, and now I go back and I arrest him also on dealing in stolen property. It was a satisfying day. So getting back to riding motorcycles. Get over that fear of leading the motorcycle. Don't be a wuss. A little bit at a time. How you get over your fears is you face those fears. But you don't have to face them immediately, just a little bit at a time. If you spent an hour in a parking lot, turning circles, big circles, then smaller circles, etc., in both directions, then figure eights, I guarantee you, you'll get over that fear of leading the motorcycle. If it really scares you so much that you can't even do it on your motorcycle, well, you're a crash waiting, looking for a place to happen. So get yourself a bicycle and start leading that bicycle, because it works the same way. Of course, on a bicycle, when the pedal is down, remember, it could lever you off the ground. So only lean it to its limits when that pedal is up. Get up a little speed, 10 or 12 miles an hour on the bicycle, and lead it, do the same thing. Circles and figure eights, turning your head and eyes quickly, looking only where you want the motorcycle to go. That means in a circle, over your left shoulder when you turn into the left, over your right shoulder when you turn into the right. And once you start getting over that fear, you'll find riding a lot more enjoyable. You can pull into any parking lot when you're taking a ride with your friends. Challenge yourself, challenge your friends, see how tight a turn they can make. I'll bet most of them have the exact same fears that you do. So all right, till next time.